Ladies and gentlemen, Mark Baird.
Thank you all for coming. Can everybody hear me really in the back? I'll do my best to try to remember to talk loud. It's about all I have. You know, we've expressed our humility before the Lord because He is the judge of all things, and He also is the source of all liberty. Liberty must be protected at all hazards, according to John Adams. You have a right to it, derived from your Maker. And even if that were not true, your liberty was purchased and bought for you by your fathers with their treasure, their ease, their estates, and their blood. What John Adams knew, and what John Locke knew, and what William Blackstone and Hobbes and Montesquieu and hundreds of other men that were not loud enough, Steve? Okay, gotta go like that. That were common reading for the Founding Fathers. They knew that your rights did not derive from human beings. They derive from God. You have rights because you're a human being. The California Constitution, Article 1, Section 1, says we are born free and independent beings and we enjoy inalienable rights. Among those are protecting and pursuing our property. So we have the rights, according to John Locke, to four things: to our lives, to our liberty, to our property, and to defend those things the best that we can. Now, John Locke was one of the authors of the liberty that the United States founders used to draw up the Constitution of the United States and the Declaration of Independence. That's where those things come from. There is nothing new under the sun. Our founders did not invent these principles. They found them in other places. The word liberty is 6,000 years old. It's first found in the Bible. Proclaim liberty throughout the land and to all the inhabitants therein. That's how old liberty is. Now, Thomas Gordon said, wherever there's liberty, there is usually a plot against it. And the moments of liberty have been fleeting and few in the 6,000 years that led up to this Constitution. So as Daniel Webster tells us, hang on to the Constitution, my friends, and to the Republic for which it stands. For miracles do not tend to cluster, and what has happened once in 6,000 years is not likely to happen again. The Constitution is the rule book for the United States of America. It's only about 7,000 words. It's a very thin document. This court was created by that document. This was not a land filled with courts and government waiting for you to show up so that you could be governed. That's not how this works. This state was not a place filled with government waiting for people in California to show up so that they could be ruled over. This was a nation of people. And Thomas Paine says in Common Sense that when people arrive in a place, that they establish government so that it is mutually beneficial to all of them. The example he uses is if one man were to cut down a tree, he wouldn't be strong enough to drag it to his place and build a house out of it. But if he got 10 of his neighbors to help him, they could build houses for everyone. That's how society was established, and I can prove that in 10,000 documents and 10,000 speeches and 10,000 letters. And this court should be aware of every single one of them. Our problem is the courts don't work. They don't represent the people who created them. They don't serve the people who created this government. They serve themselves. And when you look at the monument to somebody's ego behind me and all of the people ensconced inside there, can you imagine in your wildest dreams that they care a lick about what you want or what you need or what you demand in court or what is fair or what is justice? I cannot. And we've seen that behavior time and time again out of the court. Courts deny people justice in many ways. In fact, the courts just plain don't work. Let's look at the system of the federal courts. First of all, when a judge retires and he becomes a retired jurist, here's what happens. He can serve for periods of a year at a time at the pleasure of the chief magistrate. In other words, he gets a part-time job, he can pick and choose his cases, he still gets paid. But an Article 3 judge serves for the term of life in good behavior. In other words, an Article 3 judge is beholden to the people and to the United States Congress and to the President of the United States, where a retired judge is only beholden to the Chief Magistrate, and if he doesn't rule the way the Chief Magistrate would prefer that he rule, he won't be asked back for another year, and he won't get his paycheck, and he won't get his benefits in his fancy office. So is that a judge beholden to the people, or is that a judge beholden to the court that he works for? And Koch said all courts are corrupt. Not because they're necessarily bad people, but all the judges know where their paycheck comes from. Courts do not serve justice, they serve themselves. Courts do not work for several reasons. One of those reasons is the principle of general harm. General harm is nothing but institutionalized tyranny. What happens in a general harm event, like this court finds for us, yes, you may not have representation, but because everyone is harmed equally, there's nothing the court can do about it. Well, the Chinese government, probably today, they're going to erase the line in their constitution that has term limits for their president. Their president is going to make himself president for life of China. And the court and their representative body doesn't serve the people, it serves their party. And so they will pass this amendment to their constitution. Now, let's imagine the Chinese had a court of justice like we're supposed to have in that building behind us. And they bring a case into court that says the president of China made himself president for life. Well, this court says to us, well, yes, you don't have enough representation, and yes, that's probably illegal, but since all of you are harmed equally, there's nothing I'm going to do about it. That is nothing but institutionalized tyranny. Can you imagine that in Hugo Chavez's Venezuela? If you could get that case into court, the court would say, well, yes, Hugo is a murderous dictator and he's killing everyone and people are starving to death in the road, but you're all harmed equally, and so there's nothing I'm going to do about it. The other part of the court that doesn't work, the political question. Courts say, I can't solve this question because courts don't venture into the political arena. I would cough and scream, oh, bull, but I don't want to do it in front of the ladies. That is such a lie and such a load of BS that I can't even believe it. Because, let's ask ourselves, if courts don't enter into political questions, how did we get where we are now? Because it was the court in Baker versus Carr and Gray versus Sanders and Reynolds versus Sims that erased the way many states conduct state elections. The court in Gray versus Sanders said that all states have to elect all state officers by the one-man, one-vote principle. And in Reynolds versus Sims, they said that all states have to conduct elections according to schemes supervised by the federal court. Well, I'll tell you, the justice in Baker versus Carr that dissented against that opinion said, and I quote, "This court has no business sticking its nose into the thorny thicket of state politics." Well, if that's the case, then how come courts can't enter political questions now? Because that's how we got here to start with. And Chief Justice Earl Warren, who was also a governor of California, and he was the state's attorney general for the state of California, and the guy never read the California Constitution, because he said counties do not deserve individual representation because they're political arms of the state. Well, California's Constitution, Article 11, Section 1, says counties are legal subdivisions of the state. As such, they have a legal description. So Earl Warren was not only misinformed, but he entered a political question, and he changed the way about 30 state legislatures elect their officers. Well, the result of that is what we have now, institutionalized tyranny, because people in the far north of California and in rural areas can never match the unbridled power of the urban centers. And so we're outvoted on every question at every turn, and that is not justice, and that is not an Article 4, Section 4 representative government, which we are guaranteed under the Constitution of the United States. And this court fails to see that, they fail to recognize it, and they do not want to give you justice in that case. Courts do not work because of our access to justice. How can we have access to justice when it costs $1 million to bring a case? How do the people of this state gain justice? The reason we're here is because our counties are broke, our children are leaving, we have an oligarchy in this state that will not allow representation to people in minority, and yet the court stands here and says you can have justice if you pay and pay and pay and pay and pay. And if a retired judge or some other judge doesn't deny your claim to justice because it's a political question, or it's a question of general harm, or the other aspect that the court denies us justice in is the justicability of it. You know, the court says, well, maybe you're right, maybe it's all true, but since there is no way for me to mathematically figure out how to remedy that, I can't help you, too bad, so sad, goodbye, too bad, good luck with your life. Well, that's not true, because in the Reynolds case, the Chief Justice of the United States Supreme Court, he changed the way 30 states elected state officers, and he wasn't worried about how that was going to be done. In the state of California, we had a system of government where there were checks and balances between rural California and urban California, and it worked. It was the last time in this state we had less than $5 billion worth of debt. Now, under Earl Warren's tyranny and the institutional tyranny that is forwarded every single day in the monument to their ego, denies us justice in that aspect, and we're now 1.4, 1.2, 1.4 trillion dollars in debt. And according to the judges in that building, well, there's nothing I can do about that because everybody is harmed equally. And oh, I couldn't figure out the arithmetic even if I wanted to help you. Let me help the judge here. George Washington said one representative for 30,000 is democracy and one for 40 is tyranny. Thomas Paine in Common Sense said the first legislature will be held under the branches of a tree, and everyone just gathers. And as population grows in the colony, we must add representation so that every corner of the colony remains represented by people who are not distant from the people they represent, people who still have an attachment and therefore do not develop agendas of their own. Do we have that system now? We have an oligarchy of 120 men here who deny us justice every single day, and they won't even pick up the phone. We have the building behind us where the United States Court, the federal court of the United States, organized under Article 3 of a Constitution that the people created to make sure we have justice, and they will deny us justice every single time because they say the people of this country do not have the standing to come before their venerated honorable justice and plead our case in court. Can you imagine that? This government was created by the people. How do we know that? How can I prove that? Was this a government waiting for us, or did we create the government? We, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union. What is the obligation of this government? What is the one job of government? We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, and they are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights. And among those are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, and when government, and they also derive all of their just power from the consent of the government. And whenever governments fail in these ends, or in these ends are destructive, it is the right of the people to alter or abolish that form of government and institute a new form of government more suitable to their needs. You see, folks, we have all the power. We are the people of the United States. We created the government that built this building. In fact, with our hands alone, we built this building. There were men here that put that stone up and put the glass in it, and they have no more right to justice than you do. Because these judges in here, the oligarchy, the retired judges, and the monarchy of the justice system in the United States will deny you justice every single day because you don't belong in court. You, the people of the United States, you, the people of the state of California that created this government, don't have enough power to come before a judge and have your case fairly heard. Another reason we have to come here, what's the First Amendment? What are the amendments to the Constitution? Why are they in that document? Why were they placed there by our founders? There was a group of men called the Anti-Federalists, and they were afraid. They weren't against Constitution, but they were afraid that the Constitution did not protect liberty in the way that it should. It wasn't enough. And the Federalists threw them the bone of putting in the amendments to the Constitution in order to guarantee what they thought they had to have, their liberty. And so, in the First Amendment, we have the absolute inalienable right to peacefully assemble and petition the government for redress of grievance. Now, when we stand at the corner and scream at the glass in this building, do you think anyone in there cares? Do you think because we're here they're going to change their minds? I sincerely doubt it. So where would we petition the government peacefully to redress a wrong that's been done to us? In court. Well, how can we get there when the judge said that the people who created this government don't have the right to come before me and plead their case? How will we ever see justice when this court denies us the very justice we're guaranteed in the document we wrote that created this court? Article 1 in the United States Constitution is legislative. It's there because it's the most important article in the Constitution, not because it's least. Article 1 describes the houses of the people. That is the people's branch of government. You know, the tree of liberty, the roots are the Bible. I can prove that in 1,000 documents and 1,000 speeches. Anyone that denies that denies the truth and denies history. And even whether you're a Christian or not, follow this as a legal argument. The trunk of the tree of liberty is the people. Upon the people's shoulders stand the government. We created the government on Christian principles in order to secure our rights, to secure our inalienable rights, what John Locke called the absolute rights, and what William Blackstone called also the absolute rights. That's why we have government. And upon the people's shoulders stand three branches to the tree of liberty. And those branches are supposed to be equal in length and equal in power. They are separated from one another intentionally. They're not so far separated that they can't impact the whole, but they are supposed to be separated. Article 1, the people's house, is the first branch. That is closest to the people. Government works best that is closest to the people. And so the legislative branch has certain powers that the people delegate to them in order to secure our liberty. The second branch is the executive. The executive branch is beholden to the people's house for their money and beholden to the people themselves for their votes and to the Electoral College to put them in business. The judicial branch, according to the Federalist Papers, was supposed to be the weakest branch of government. And in fact, they have no power of their own unless it is lent to them by the executive. The court doesn't have a police force or an army. They can issue all the directives they want and people can thumb their nose at them unless the police power of the executive is willing to go out and enforce those directives and those edicts and those decisions. So the court was designed to be the weakest branch of government, and it was designed not to write law but to adjudicate law. They have the power under the Constitution over all things that derive from the document. They never had the power to change the contract that created them to begin with. So the court itself is not supposed to write law. Well, why is it that they do it every single day and nobody stops them? How can the court honestly sit back and tell the executive branch of government that they are not allowed to allow an executive order to expire on time? How on earth can the court turn to the people who created this government and say to those very people, you lack the authority and do not have the right to stand before us and petition for redress of a grievance? How does all of this happen? How can we have found ourselves in the place we are now? We are the people that created this government. Are we a nation of laws or are we a nation of people? And we have laws who protect some of the people and subject the others to tyranny. I suggest to you that we have progressed past the point where we are a nation of laws. Because if that were not true, Governor Jerry Brown would be in jail right now. Because U.S. Code Title 8, Section 1384, subsection 3, prevents anyone from knowingly conspiring or shielding or harboring an illegal alien. And it is a felony, a federal felony. If you committed that felony, you'd be in jail. But he can commit the felony and nothing happens because we have a set of rules that are propagated by the tyranny inside that building, and they are designed to subject you to their rules. For example, the California legislature passed a law and they exempt themselves from the show cause laws of concealed carry. You have to go into a sheriff's department if you live in one of the subject counties, and you have to plead your case and say, I have a reason to believe that my life is in danger. Oh, please, please, government, allow me to protect myself. The people in the legislature don't have to do that. They just go downtown and say, I want to carry a gun, and they get the permit. And anyway, John Locke says you have the absolute right to protect yourself, your home, your community, and your state. You have the absolute right. In fact, that right shall not be infringed, shall it? The right to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Well, why is it being infringed then? Because the court is an oligarchy and the legislature is beholden to the executive and in fact have abdicated their responsibility to the executive branch of government. How do we know that? Because we have no representation. The state of California, at its inception, had 40,000 people in it. By the time the legislature capped itself, there were 400,000 people, less than 500,000 people. At that time, the legislature turned to the 500,000 people in California and said, it is no longer convenient for us to increase our numbers in order to adequately represent you so that representation is close to the people they're supposed to serve. They did that for a discriminatory purpose, and we can prove that too. They did it to prohibit the Chinese people from gaining access to power in the representative body of the people, the people's house. And no one did anything about it. Certainly not the courts and certainly not the executive. But here's the bad news, folks. The pendulum of discrimination is always swinging. In the 1870s, it was the Chinese, and now it's you. You're being discriminated against in your own home because you have been denied access to your representative and you've been denied access to the executive, and the court tells you you have no right to be here at all because the harm is general, so we can't help you. Too bad. And you are the people that created this court, by the way. Now, what happened in the ensuing 150 years here in California? 39.5 million people came to the state of California and not one single representative was added to the legislature. We now have 40 million people with the same amount of representation we had when we only had 400,000 people. So we have three co-equal branches, right? Why don't we call that the three-legged stool? And those legs are equal because your liberty and your money and your property sit on top of the stool. Well, one branch was capped at 6 inches. And in the ensuing 150 years, the other two branches are growing like weeds. So now the top of the stool is not level. You have no representation, and your liberty, your money, and your property are sliding off the top of the stool. That's why we're here today, to increase representation so that we have three branches of government that are equal in power and restore the right of the people to petition their government for redress of grievance and hope to succeed, at least have a hope to succeed. You know, no one's expecting a perfect outcome every time, but what we do expect is our day in court. We demand our day in court. We will settle for nothing less than our day in court. We created the court that occupies this building. No one else. We the people. We the people of the state of California, grateful to Almighty God for our freedom, that to secure and perpetuate its blessings, we established this Constitution. This Constitution means nothing to the people in the State House. I would bet you $100, 99% of them have never even read it. They don't know that Jerry Brown has violated Article 3, Section 1 when he went to China and made a deal with the Chinese. They don't know or care that Jerry Brown violated Article 10, Section 3 when he made a deal with the Chinese, because no state shall make any agreement with any foreign power except with the consent of Congress. I don't remember Congress passing a law to tell Jerry it's okay to make deals with the Chinese. Xavier Becerra said he will fight the United States government and he will fight for a sanctuary state. Xavier Becerra is now in violation of United States Code, Title 8, Section 1384. He is in violation. He is a federal felon. Why is he not in jail? You would be in jail for committing the same crime. Are we a nation of people, or are we a nation of laws? And we need to ask ourselves that question every day, because quite frankly, this is all our own fault. We allowed this to happen because we remained silent while the government usurped our liberty and changed the character of the document that created them. We allowed that to happen, and we're not going to allow it anymore. We demand our day in court. Do you trust a government that doesn't trust you? No. Do you have faith in a government to do the right thing for you when that government doesn't even trust you and won't allow you to have your day in court? Do you have faith in that government? Do you have faith that the people who created this government and created a nation of laws have a hope to have justice in the day and age that we're in right now? I hope we can make it happen, but right now I don't, because we're being denied at every turn our day in court, and for reasons, by the way, that the court has already disallowed. The judge in our case has said that it's a political question, it's a question of general harm, and it's not justicable. Well, the three-judge court in Baker versus Carr said the same thing, only to be overturned by the Supreme Court. These arguments have been played out time and time and time and time again. They are designed to tyrannize you and designed to deny you access to justice. They're designed to deny you fair access to your representative body, and we've got to stop that. Sorry, I got to turn the page now. I'm actually using my notes today a little bit. Now, General Joshua Lawrence Chamberlain, at a commemorative in the Battle of Gettysburg, he made the statement that the people on that field did something great for generations that know us not and who we know not of. Abraham Lincoln called that giving their last full measure for the cause of liberty. You know, our fathers thought it was so important that they fought and they died for this. My father stood in the rain on Saipan and Tinian, and his father stood in the rain in the Ardennes Wood. I thought we were going to be standing in the rain today ourselves. The cause of liberty is so important and so undeniable that it is time for the people to stand up and speak. Blowing my pages around, sorry. Yeah, hold that just for a second. Thanks. Patrick Henry said on March 23rd of 1775 that different people see things in a different light. Not everyone sees things the same. Issues mean different things to different people. And he also said it is natural for man to indulge in the illusions of hope. It's natural for us to hope that everything will turn out all right. It's natural for the human animal to do nothing and hope for a better result tomorrow, because every day is a new day, right? And every day could turn out better than the day before. And we always hope for those things, because as Christians and moral, ethical people, we want to do things in a moral and ethical way. But as for me, I want to know the full truth. For my part, whatever anguish the truth may cause my spirit, I want to know what that truth is so that I can plan for it and I can try to deal with it. And these are the words of Patrick Henry. I'm willing to know the whole truth, to know the worst and to provide for it. Our nation, our state, is built on an ideal, and that ideal has run aground. Do we run? Do we flee? Do we run from our fight? Do we run for our lives? Do we sacrifice our property? Can we mind our own business and hope all of this just goes away? The next wind that blows may bring to our ears the clash of arms. That's what Patrick Henry said. You know, they were in Virginia, and they were in the State House, and he was asking these guys, he said, they're fighting in Boston, everybody. They're fighting there, our brothers. The British have burned Falmouth. They're killing people. They're murdering. They're subjugating. They're tyrannizing. While we sit here idly, how long do we sit? How long do we wait? He's asking them. The wind blows, may bring to our ears the clash of arms. Why stand we here idle? What is it you want? And he said that to the people in the room. He said, what would gentlemen have? What is it you want here? In a perfect world, how do you want this to turn out? He was asking them genuinely. And then he said, is life so sweet? Is peace so dear to be purchased at the price of slavery and change? Almighty God forbid it. For I know not what course others may take, but as for me, give me liberty or give me death. We demand justice. We demand our day in court. We're not asking anyone's permission. The court doesn't work. We are here to repair that. I'd like to just remind you in closing, we all know about rights. We all know the word rights, don't we? What does that mean? What is a right? There are two concepts in law that create that. The right is what the people have. It was what John Locke called the absolutes, what William Blackstone called the absolutes. Your right to life, liberty, property, and defense of same. So how did we come to the word rights? The rights are the things that people are allowed to do. Those are things you're allowed to do because you're citizens of this nation. The wrongs are things that government is never allowed to do. The word right naturally derives from the sense of right and wrong. People are permitted to do literally anything provided it does not infringe on the life, liberty, property, or common defense of your neighbor or anyone else for that matter. Those are your rights. You are right to do those things. Government, on the other hand, has wrongs. It is not permitted to do anything that is not strictly spelled out in the Constitution of the United States. Those are the wrongs. We have the rights, those belong to the people. The wrongs are things that government is prohibited from doing. How are we doing so far on the wrongs?
Not good. 100%.
We have partly come to this place because we have allowed government to take the place of God in our lives. We allowed that. We can fix all of those things. We are the people mentioned in the Declaration of Independence. We are the people mentioned in the Constitution. And I am so proud to be here with you today to demand our day in court. We will have justice. We will have our day in court. Look, I'm not so naive that I'm going to stand here and say to you, there's a predetermined outcome to this. Because we stamp our feet, we're going to get everything we want. And we're not asking for that. But we're asking for a fair hearing. We're asking for our day in court. What we're asking is, can one state senator possibly represent 1 million people and fulfill his constitutional obligation, as well as oversee 575 state agencies and 2,500 judges? Is that possible? No. Is it possible for one state assemblyman to represent 500,000 people and to be so close to the people that he represents? In Thomas Paine's article, he says, so that his agenda does not diverge from the people he represents, and so the representative does not form his own plan for the future. In other words, representatives are supposed to be connected to you. Can one state senator adequately represent 500,000 people? No. Not one has been added in 150 years. So what we're asking is a question that will be asked again. If the answer to that is yes, then we have our answer and we'll try to go to the Supreme Court and get that changed. If the answer to that is you don't belong in court, well, will that question be asked again? What are we going to do? When it's 10 million, 15 million, 20 million people per state senator, is that too many? Or do we have to wait until it's 1 billion people per state senator? We're asking a question that is a fair question that will be asked again and again and again until it gets an answer. We deserve that answer now. We demand justice. We demand our day in court. Invidious discrimination is not a general harm. It is an individual harm. And nevertheless, even if it is a general harm, people created government. People created the court, not the other way around. We demand justice. Thank you very much. May God bless you and keep you safe in your travels.